Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Hello and welcome to Books to Screen, the series where I invite bookish guests to join me for deep dives into my favourite topic, adaptations. Joining me for the latest instalment is author and friend of the pod, the wonderful Catherine Airey. You might remember Catherine from our episode in January last year, where she joined us to chat about her incredible generational saga novel, Confessions. Our adaptation of choice today is one of the OG generational saga novels, Emily Bronte's Gothic debut, Wuthering Heights. Emerald Fennell's recent film adaptation of the novel, starring Margot Robbie as Cathy and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, has attracted an immense amount of discourse, making this adaptation one of our most controversial yet. The novel was published in 1847 and became a classic in English literature. Set against the backdrop of the Yorkshire moors, Wuthering Heights tells the story of Cathy and Heathcliff, a relationship that is doomed from the start. Some might argue it's a romance, but at the heart of the story is an exploration of class, race, abuse, and generational trauma, and the fate of these two characters can only really be described as bleak. So much has been said already about this adaptation, but we're going to add to it anyway. Welcome back, Catherine, to Pair of Bookends.
Hi, Anna.
I feel like you need to be like, it's me, I'm Cathy.
Yeah. Oh, I've been like, I did. Oh, I don't have it now. I did like write a little song. I was in the car the other day, and I did a version of the "It's Me, It's Cathy," the Kate Bush version, but where I came up with like some other lyrics for it. That was, oh God, I should have remembered it now. I can remember one line of it, which was, "It's all indoors, they're never in the moors," because my main point, which I'll make out the very top of the podcast, is that everyone thinks that this is a book slash story about being outside on these misty moors, and actually the whole thing is inside. It was all a lie.
Yeah.
You know about the novel is not true. I only read it for the first time in the summer, and I was just so confused. So I was like, they're never even on the moors. What is everyone talking about?
What is going on?
So I wrote a whole song about that, which is on my voice notes, on my voice memos on my phone at the moment, but probably best that I can't remember it.
I'm obsessed. I feel like I need to hear this. I can insert it at the end of the book.
Main line is, "It's all indoors, they're never on the moors."
They're lying.
And also, did you know that room and moor is like an anagram of each other?
Oh.
So it's like the moors outside and then like a room inside, and it's the same.
I didn't know that.
Symbol.
Love that. We will have a lot to discuss, and I'm really excited. But before we get into the bulk of the chat on Wuthering Heights, I do have some quick fire questions for you on adaptations. Are you ready, Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay. What, in your opinion, is the best adaptation?
Okay, it's a bit niche. Hunger Games, Catching Fire, number 2.
Amazing.
I think number 2 is an edge of your seat adaptation. I think it's really brilliant. I think it's better than the first one, better than the ones that follow it. Yeah, I think number 2 is a really good adaptation.
Can you believe I've never read or watched any of the Hunger Games, which is shocking.
I can't believe that, actually.
Yeah, it's really bad.
How did you get away with that?
I actually don't know, because I was very into like Harry Potter and Twilight and all the like major like franchises of the time. Like I was very into all of that. So I don't know how, considering how huge it was and how many people were consuming it at the same time, like I don't know how that passed me by. So weird. I keep wanting to I keep wanting to like watch them, but I've just I don't know if I've missed the boat.
Nah, it's never too late.
What is, in your opinion, the best character casting?
Have you seen I Capture the Castle?
I haven't.
So I think, what's her name? Romola Gari? I don't know how to say her surname. She's the lead in I Capture the Castle, which is one of my favorite books. And I don't necessarily think it's the best adaptation, but she's like exactly how I imagine that character.
Love that.
That was nice.
That is another book I really need to get to. I've heard amazing things about it.
Yeah, it's I think it's in particular like a lot of writers. I think it's like one of their like, important books.
Yeah, I need to get to that. An adaptation that you'd love to see.
One of my favorite novels is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. And it's like a campus novel about the protagonist who's gone to Harvard, but she's just very sort of like, she's very intelligent, but also quite like naive and doesn't really know what's going on a lot of the time. And I think that could be a really good series if done right.
Yeah, I think that would be great as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you read before you watch? If you know of the
Most of
material.
the time, I actually read Wuthering Heights last summer, so summer of 2025.
Oh,
I think it was like after the trailer came out, and I was very
right, okay.
intrigued by the trailer. And I'd also tried to read it twice before at earlier points in my life. So I think I tried to read it as a teenager and then tried to read it in my 20s at some point. And I could never get through it. I didn't understand it. I didn't think it was very good. And then I thought I'll give it another try. And then it just really clicked for me this time.
Hmm.
So, which is why I messaged you to be like, can I come and do the Wuthering Heights one? Because I was sort of, I didn't grow up loving it. It took me a while to sort of get it. So, yeah, I think I do usually want to have read the book
Hmm.
first. I'm trying to think if there are examples of ones where I've done it the other way around. I don't know.
That's
But
fair.
yeah, I think
Um,
mostly first.
I'm really intrigued of how you found it this time round as a book, and I will ask you about that in a sec. I've got three more questions for you. An author that you think would be great at writing for screen.
You had her on the other week, Roxy Dunn.
Yes,
Think
yeah.
she's so good at like dialogue. Like I think I'm really not very good at dialogue. I really struggle with it, but I think I think I can really imagine her books being on the screen, and
Yeah.
I think she would be really good because I know she has like an acting background as well,
Yeah,
doesn't
she
she?
does,
Like
yeah.
I think she would just get it.
I
Um,
think As Young as This would be so good as a
yeah,
series. You know,
yeah,
it's got that episodic nature to it, doesn't it?
yeah.
I think that would be so good. I'd love to
Oh
see
yeah,
that.
it'd be perfect, wouldn't it? Because
Yeah,
like each episode would be the different
different guy.
person. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the ending absolutely destroyed me in the book, so I don't know how I'd
yeah,
how I'd cope with that on screen.
yeah.
An upcoming adaptation that you're excited for?
What is coming up?
Good question. I don't know why it's come straight into my head, but the Odyssey, Vladimir, Margot's got money troubles.
Okay. No, I'm very not in the loop about most things,
That's
but
so fair. There's always something that's like optioned, but then you don't know if it's actually going to happen. I think the
oh,
process is so, oh,
the Rachel incident has been filmed at the moment.
yes!
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
Can't
looking
wait.
forward to
Can't
that.
wait
And I
for
know
that.
that like Caroline is like she's written. I think she's very involved in the
Yeah,
adaptation
she is. Yeah.
and
And
like filming
her
cool stuff. So that'll be fun.
her dialogue is so good as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
I think that's going to be an absolute banger. An adaptation you hated.
I didn't like this was a while back. The most recent Anna Karenina,
Oh,
which is
really?
my favorite books, the Keira Knightley one. But I actually think I might like it if I watched it again because it's very, from what I remember, it all looks very like a play.
Okay.
Like it's very much like on a set rather than looking real.
Hmm.
And I actually quite like that about this Wuthering Heights adaptation, but I hated it then. I think my at the time I wanted an adaptation that felt very real rather than like an
Hmm.
interpretation. So I hated that then, but maybe I'll give it another try.
Interesting. I haven't read Anna Karenina, but my mother-in-law got it me a couple of Christmases ago, and she was like, "I'm always hearing you say on the podcast that you love an affair novel, so why have you not read this?"
Mm,
So I'm really excited to get into that. But I'm so scared of classics
yeah,
that I've got such gaps in my literary education where classics are concerned, and I always expect to not understand them.
yeah.
And I think this is why I was so excited to do this episode because I hadn't read Wuthering Heights before. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to understand it. I didn't
Uh-huh.
know if it was going to be too dense for me. But I actually think I mean, I'm saying this like I'm the first person to think it. I actually think it's an incredible novel.
Yay, I'm so pleased. 'Cause I know that you were a bit like worried about reading it, and I
Yeah,
totally get that. I remember when I did English at uni, and I can remember there were some weeks when the books we were doing, and I just didn't understand what was going on at all, and we didn't have enough
yeah.
time to like, and like I didn't feel like I could sit there and say, I'm finding this really difficult.
Hmm.
So I would just like pretend that I knew what
You
was
could
going on
understand.
to get
Yeah.
like out in some ways. So I can totally see that thing of old books seeming really intimidating.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm really pleased that you didn't find that, because I totally get that feeling. Did you find it like a difficult read?
Yeah, I definitely did, but I think it is very chaotic
Yeah,
as a novel, obviously, and it's, it's very like wacky and wild, and it's like, is this happening? Is this being imagined? Like, it's, a lot of it is your own sort of interpretation, I guess, and also the fact that there's like characters with like the same names,
yeah,
and it does get a bit like confusing at the start, I think.
yeah,
And I did have to, for the first couple of chapters, I had to use a like chapter by chapter guide. So like I wouldn't read it before reading the chapter because I didn't want it to give anything away, but I'd read a chapter and
yeah,
then read the guide to check that I'd understood it
yeah,
correctly. So I did that. I kept a lot of notes. My friend Emma, who is, much better with classics than me, I was constantly messaging her and being like, have I got this right? Like, is this person this? There are like, I found it really hard with the amount of times that Kathy was named at the start. And I was like, which Kathy is which? What is
yeah.
going on? So that really threw me. But then I think, yeah, once you get into it, you kind of understand a lot better, like what is going on. I think just at the start, when you're not used to that sort of narrative voice, I think that's confusing as well, is like knowing who is talking.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think that like at the time when this book would have been written, there was no TV, there was no
Yeah,
radio. People like didn't really have anything else to do other than reading, and I think our attention spans are so different now
oh,
because of the
yeah,
world that
totally.
we live in, and we're just not used to focusing on a book in that kind of way. And I don't necessarily even think that's a bad thing all in and of itself, but it does mean that the books, contemporary books that we're used to reading, are written in a different way,
Yeah,
and you have to kind of train yourself, I think, to read a classic these
yeah,
days.
yeah,
But
100%.
but I think it's so great that you can then like look up study guides or whatever. Like you don't have to feel like you have to get it all of it straight
Yeah.
away. Like especially I would look up, like the dialect of Joseph, and I'm always just like, I don't know what he's saying, and it's really kind of liberating to just be like, I can look it up and that's fine.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because I think like I'm northern, like I'm a Manc, and obviously, that makes me different. Like I'm not from Yorkshire, but even for me, I was like, I've no idea what this guy's
Yeah,
saying. And my friend Emma was like, say it in a Yorkshire accent. And I was like, even when I do that, it's not necessarily like easy to grasp. Like some sentences, like you could be like, oh, if I say it in a Yorkshire accent, I can understand it. But some of the times it's like, well, that's something that would be used in a sentence back then. It's not something that we would necessarily
yeah,
say now. So even if I do it in a Yorkshire accent, it doesn't mean it's any easier to understand. So I did kind of struggle with some of those parts of the novel when, when they were talking in Yorkshire dialect. But yeah, I think it is an incredible novel. Like, and I'm so glad that I've read it. Obviously, you said that you struggled with it when you tried in school and in your 20s, and then you've obviously returned to it now. So how was the experience different this time around?
so I think as a teenager, I had this idea of the novel in my head before I'd even tried to read it. I guess I think I knew that it was this big love story, that it was set on the Yorkshire moors. And so as a kind of horny teenager, sat down to read it, really excited. And then I was like, who's this man then at the beginning with Lockwood? And then I was like, and now he's just talking to the servant and she's telling the story. And I was like, where are the main characters?
Yeah,
And I think all I wanted was this like steamy romance.
yeah,
But instead there was this servant woman sat in front of the fire telling a story. And that wasn't what I wanted then. Whereas now I think that is what is quite special about it, and what makes it a really difficult thing to adapt for screen. Because
hmm
I think because maybe as a writer, I find those sort of like nestled narratives very compelling. The fact
hmm
that the whole book is the telling of a story versus us. Yeah, I think that there's like the layers to it that I actually find really compelling. I find it so compelling that Nelly, who's like the main narrator,
hmm
is a servant, and she's telling this story about this love story when she's like never been in love herself, and
yeah,
when like she doesn't get to have a story. She's somebody who doesn't get to have a voice, but then
hmm
Emily Bronte still gives her the voice. And I think that is, there's something really special about that.
yeah,
I really like, but it's so hard to translate. Whereas I think what I wanted it to be when I was a teenager was what this adaptation was. And that I do find that interesting then, because I think Emerald Fennell has spoken about that and how she's made like an adaptation of her idea of the book as a teenager. So it's like a faithful adaptation, but I think it's so interesting that the book has failed to be adapted so many times. The fact that they always cut off the latter half of the book, the next generation. How spoilery are we meant to be?
No, we can be as spoilery as we want. Yeah, I'm assuming loads of people are going to have watched the film by now, so.
But I think the fact that the book has failed to be adapted so many times, and I watched the 2011 version the other day by Andrea Arnold, and I think it's really good. It's so different. It's quite like joyless, and it's not fun in the way that I think this one is.
Yeah, is that Kaya Scodelario? I don't know how you say her name.
Yeah, she plays the older Kathy.
But I don't know if I heard this on a podcast or something, but is that version from Heathcliff's perspective?
Ooh, I guess it kind of is. It's definitely not from Nelly's perspective. And so like, even though I think of it as being much more faithful to the book in terms of what actually happens, and they're not cutting out characters, or they're not making it like really opulent. It's very sparse and like quite cold, but it still doesn't have the framing device that the book has. So it still isn't doing that. I don't, and even the first version that I watched, which is when's that from, like 1939 maybe?
Oh wow.
I can't remember, but that one as well, it's just no adaptation as far as I'm aware has managed to like make it true to the book. And not that I think that matters, but it's not easy, I don't think, to do an adaptation of it.
I do think it's a shame that they don't include the latter half, because I think, that's sort of the core of the novel, is that these cycles just keep continuing. I just think it's a really interesting choice that they do tend to cut that out, and I do wonder why that's so difficult for them to do, because surely it's easier to illustrate on screen, how these things continue to play out than it is in a book. I wonder if in novel form that's what makes it quite dense, is that you're trying to keep track of all these characters and these different relationships, whereas on screen it's maybe easier to keep track of, I want to say. So I just wonder why they choose to just get rid of that. But you don't think that it's sort of a loss for them to cut those things out?
I think it is a loss.
Yeah.
But I just think that the book is such a... Okay, so I have this thing about stuff being told in the right form. Yeah. And I think the book is so much a book. Yeah. As in, I think it's so much about oral storytelling. And it's not really, as I said, it's not really about being out on the moors. It's about someone telling this story by the fire, and like, because Nelly is a servant, and she's not allowed to go out running around on the moors like Kathy and Heathcliff are. She has no idea what they get up to out there. Her perspective is this like really limited, and I think that's something that a novel can do so well, is offer one person's perspective. Whereas visual storytelling is different, and I can see why it means that people want to simplify that story and make it just about the central dynamic between Kathy and Heathcliff.
I want to ask, before we dive into the sort of casting elements and sort of go deeper into the adaptation, I really want to ask you about your relationship to Emerald Fennell's work, and if you were familiar with it before watching this film.
Yeah, I have. I've seen Promising Young Women and Saltburn.
Yeah.
So fairly familiar. Yeah. I was a huge fan. Like, I definitely enjoyed both of those films. And I do think that, I guess having watched this as well, I do just think that they're very engaging. It's like, I think no matter what I think about what's going on in them, I do find them very like Moorish.
Yes,
and I think her
films are very entertaining.
Yeah, I have a good time watching, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I don't feel that way about that many directors, I guess.
Yeah, I think she is really good at capturing modern audiences' attention. And like you said before, like, our focus is so different now. Like, we're unable to, focus on things, and our attention spans are all over the place. Whereas I feel like the way she creates films sort of lends itself to that. Like, there's always something going on. It's a very sensory experience watching her films. films, you know, like sounds and visuals, and like, you know, even down to like textures. Like she zones in on textures, you know, we saw with the egg yolks in this film and the jellied fish, you know, it's even the opening of the film, you know, where immediately we can't see what's going on, but we can just hear a sound, and that sound has our attention, and we want to find out. And I think, yeah, she's very good at like keeping you entertained and keeping you hooked on the narrative. I think she's made some really interesting choices with this, and I will say off the bat that she did put quotation marks around Wuthering Heights. So she isn't saying that like this is a faithful, perfect adaptation. This is just her interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And whilst I disagree with some of the choices that she's made, I wouldn't say that I'm, you know, a purist when it comes to things like this. I am intrigued by some of the stuff that she's done. And as I said to you before we started recording, like, I did enjoy this as a film. I thought it was great. Do I think it's a perfect adaptation? Maybe not. But do I think it's a really good film? Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm so relieved to hear you say that, because you know I've spent the last like week since I watched it a week ago,
Yes.
and all I've seen online is a lot of people saying how much they hated it. And actually, when people who know that I've been going to come on this podcast to talk about it, I've had people message me just being like, I hated the film.
Oh no.
So I was getting a bit like worried.
Were you feeling pressure?
I was feeling the pressure of like, I'm going to be the only person who thinks it's not that bad.
No, I don't think you are.
I just really don't think it's that bad. I think it was enjoyable. I think there are some questionable choices that say perhaps are revealing about what Emerald Fennell thinks of the book, but then I think that sort of says a bit in itself, right? It's kind of what I was saying earlier, that we all have this idea of this novel that perhaps isn't what it actually is. And I think that that's interesting too. And yes, it might be her like teenage idea of the book, but yeah, I think that the fact that she's put it in quotation marks and that she seems to be self-aware-ish about that, even if some of those choices reveal stuff that maybe she wouldn't, that maybe aren't the best.
Yeah. I think it's really funny that you said before about when you first went into it as a teenager thinking that you were going to get this steamy romance and then just not getting that. But then she obviously has given us that. It's very much like a fan fiction version of Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's all of the stuff that, you know, all these missed opportunities that you know, in the book, and all the want for them to, can they just get together? Can they just have some intimacy? Can they just have something?
All you want when you're reading it is for them to start fucking, and they never start fucking. Well, you don't know, but like the fact that she then gives us that, I think is
yeah, she gives us that tenfold, doesn't she? I mean, I came out of the cinema and I messaged my friend and I said, it's not historically accurate, it's not a faithful adaptation, but do I now want Jacob Elordi's fingers in my mouth? Maybe yes.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think that scene is really good. And like, you know, it wasn't a time where Emily Bronte could write about some, like, a woman in particular, like masturbating, and like then your like love interest not being freaked out by that, but like finding that sexy. That wasn't something you could talk about like when I was at school. That would have been as gross. And I think it's actually quite radical and cool to show like female desire in that way, and for that not to be seen as something that's gross.
Yes, yeah. I although I was slightly disturbed, and my friends that I went to see it with did burst out laughing when he smelled her fingers. We were like, the mic must have been so close to his nostril because it was so loud in our cinema screen. I was like, there's no way that they've done that. Like,
yeah. But that is kind of the fun of it though as well. Like that being outside, there's no way that you can like hear that as a sound. But she does kind of amp up certain things.
That's what I was saying, you know, it is a sensory experience. So like those sounds do feel like everything feels amped up. And I do think at times it felt slightly Disneyfied in parts. Maybe when to OTT. Like, I don't think I'll ever recover from the sort of red glasses that Margot Robbie wears.
Yeah,
That did pull
yeah,
me out, and I was like, we've gone too far, hon. Like,
yeah.
let's backtrack a sec. That did pull me out, but like, you know, in other parts, I'm like, oh no, this really works. Like, it does feel really vibrant, and I did enjoy it. I am going very chaotic with this. I do want to ask you about the opening scene, because the opening scene, this is going to be a spoiler, I'm sorry. The opening scene, we hear what we think is, or we're led to believe that it's maybe somebody having a sexual encounter, maybe a private sexual encounter. Like, we're unsure from the sounds that are coming out, but it sounds sexual. And then this image lands on the screen and it's a public hanging. And that was obviously, that's true to history, that people would have gone to watch somebody being hanged. And it was very much like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it would have been something that everybody would have gone out to see.
Yeah,
Like, they would have gathered. Yeah, yeah, it was a form of entertainment. Like, they would have gathered like that. But she's amped it up by people having this sort of sexual response to it, because this man that's being hung has an erection. And I don't know if I've completely imagined this, but I swear in the initial viewings of the film, like the first time they showed critics, I'm sure I read somewhere that it was somebody being hung, they had an erection, and they also ejaculated on everyone. And I feel like I read that and I was like, that's not the version I saw. I just saw that he had an erection, and then there was like a nun that was responding quite sexually to it.
Yeah. And then there's like a couple
quite...
as well who are like making out in a very sexual way.
So I don't know where I got that ejaculating from, which is really odd, but I don't know if that was in an earlier cut of it and they got rid of it. I don't know, but I feel like I've got that from somewhere, not just made it up. But that scene is so striking, and I heard Margot Robbie talking about it in a podcast and saying that like that sets the tone. And I don't know what you thought of that initial scene.
Yeah, I think I really liked it. I enjoyed the fact that the confusion and like the what do you call it, dissonance between, that might not be the right word, between thinking like, oh, is this people having sex, and then realizing what it actually was.
Yeah.
And
you feel bad, don't you, for like half getting excited and being like, oh, what's this? And then you're like, oh shit, right.
And I like that it gets alluded to just that tiny bit later on in the film, you know, where there's Isabella wants to go to see a hanging, and you think it's going to be like Heathcliff there, but then it's a woman who's been hanged. I think it was a nice way to open the movie, and I think the fact that it's not in the book is a good way of showing this is not going to be a faithful adaptation.
Yes, yeah.
It is also like the only time, though, isn't it, that we see a scene that doesn't take place at one or the other, at one of the houses or in between.
Yeah,
houses, which is interesting because the book is so, everything takes place in this really like sealed area where there's these two houses, and occasionally you have characters going between the two on the mall. But other than that, it's just at these two settings. So yeah, it's interesting opening it somewhere that isn't that. I do think it was a really good way of setting up the fact that Nelly and Kathy are friends at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't think they did enough with it, as in, because, you know, I think what they do with Nelly's character and how they make her kind of like the villain later on.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think enough was put. I think that could be such an interesting take. I think the film I want to see of this novel is from Nelly's perspective more closely, and the pain and how hurt she would feel from being so left out and so replaced when Heathcliff comes along, when suddenly Kathy doesn't care about her anymore.
Yeah.
And I think they tried to hint at that with that opening scene, but they didn't. They then would just forget that Nelly existed at certain points, and then as soon as they older, it was just like she was this boring person. So I think they could have done more with her.
I really want to remember what the actor's name was that played Nelly.
I can't remember.
Chow. She was incredible. Like,
do you
really...
think? Oh, see, I was a bit I just thought it was very like clipped.
Oh, her.
Yeah.
Interesting. No, I really I felt like there was a lot going on under the surface, and I really like when you're able to see that and they don't necessarily have to tell you, but you can see there's a lot going on. I didn't necessarily feel that she was as unlikable in the book. as I
Mhm.
did, like, obviously in the film, like, she's a real, like, villain, but in the
Mhm.
book I didn't necessarily get a sense of that, and I don't know if that's just me misreading it. There are obviously parts, decisions that she makes in the book that I disagreed with, but I just thought it was yeah, interesting that she was such a villain in the film. I mean, she essentially is the reason why Kathy
Yeah.
dies in the film. And yeah, I do think you're right, like their friendship maybe wasn't played with enough. I do think that her social status felt elevated in the film
Yeah.
than it did in the
Yeah.
book. Did it feel like that to you?
Well, yeah, it was confusing, and this was one of the things that I didn't like about the film, and I find it really hard to articulate. But I don't think I actually have a problem with Heathcliff not being black because I think it is unclear in the novel.
Mm.
I think we should discuss that as a separate
Yeah,
fact
yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah,
later. But for me, it didn't work that most of the casting was done in a very like colorblind fashion. So I think
yeah,
having Nelly and having Edgar be not white actors
yeah.
don't I think that had a strange I think that it just made it took me out of it. It made me be
Okay.
like, is there a reason why you've done this? And then I couldn't work out what the reason was, and then I thought it was a bit not thought through. I guess the fact that then the people who weren't white in the film were either the villain of the story or the
Yeah,
undesired man, like the man who's seen as not being sexy,
yeah, that's so fair.
very like emasculated. But then it was also weird that they were like, oh, well, Nelly's dad is a lord. It just felt
Mm.
a bit, I think some of the changes were just like, but why? Like
Yeah, yeah,
her dad being a lord and her being like the bastard child, why?
yeah.
And Isabella and Edgar not actually being brother and sister, why?
Yeah, yeah. And also the father and the brother character are essentially merged in
Yeah,
the film.
I didn't mind the merging. I think the
Yeah,
merging made it quite. I think Kathy being an only child kind of actually makes sense to me in
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
like her
Her
selfishness.
behavior, yeah,
Not that all
definitely.
only children are selfish, but like
No,
I think
but
her relationship with Heathcliff was quite like powerful based on the idea of her being like quite on her own there. Uh,
yes, yeah.
and even some of the pressure that she would have felt in terms of like her marriage being important, I think
Mm,
maybe makes more sense of her being an only child and being a woman. Like that didn't bother me. I think that kind of made sense to me. And I thought, is it Martin Clunes? Is it Martin? I thought he
yes.
was so good. I
Oh
thought
my God,
his
stellar
scenes were brilliant.
performance.
I thought he
Incredible.
was such a good portrayal of being this, yeah, of like alcoholism where, it's really, really sad, but he's like not a hated figure either.
Yeah, yeah. I did think he was incredible. He was a real standout for
Yeah.
me. I thought he was a great choice, and I don't think I was mad about the merging of the father and brother character. I don't think that was a change that bothered me in the way that other things do. And I think you're so right. You've made such a good point in terms of, the actors that are playing Nelly and Edgar being the only people of colour in the film, and, Nelly being this villain and Edgar being the undesired man. I think you're so
Mhm.
right that that feels a bit of an odd choice and not very well thought through. For me, in terms of Heathcliff's casting, I that does bother me. It bothers me, and I have sort of two sides to this thought. It bothers me in the sense that I'm like, the race element feels like such a crucial element in the novel in terms of how he's ostracized, how he's treated, how he, lives a life where he's so sort of, yeah, ostracized and hated, that he becomes this very hateful, bitter person as a result of how he's been treated and abused. And obviously he is found by Kathy's father in the book
Mhm.
in Liverpool, which in that time period would have been like one of the biggest sort of ports for the slave trade. So it makes sense that he was like, I think he's described as like a stray, that he was picked up there.
Mhm.
He's often described as dark and dark skinned and as a gypsy, which could mean, various things, but it's just really interesting. There's also a line that I noted down that says, before he shows his nature in acts as well as features. And I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if that was like, oh, I thought that was a reference to his race in the way they perceived people of different backgrounds
Yeah.
in terms of race, and they made judgments about them. But I say all of that And then I also think Jacob Elordi did play it really well, and I
Yeah,
do
he's
think he was
really good.
great. And if we are looking at this as a fan fiction version of Wuthering Heights, like, yeah,
Yeah,
like their chemistry was insane. They were brilliant. He did an incredible performance. You know, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate
yeah,
his
yeah,
portrayal of Heathcliff, but I do think, you know, that is such a core part of the
yeah,
novel that it's really interesting that she's gone, yeah, you know what, I'm going with, and you know, she might argue that it's bums on seats with Jacob Elordi, you know, in terms of people going to the cinema and watching it, but I do think it is an integral part of the story in terms of
yeah.
how he was treated.
Yeah.
So
I think you're totally right with all of that. And I mean, you can definitely argue from it is ambiguous in the book,
yeah,
but ambiguous, it's not that ambiguous. He's meant to look not like the other, he's meant to look darker than
yeah,
the other people, and that isn't in the adaptation. And yeah, I would have really liked to have seen that role go to somebody who wasn't Jacob Elordi, even though he was really good at that role.
he was very good.
I think it's just I just personally find it so confusing that you're going to make Heathcliff white but then make other people not white.
Yeah,
That is, as you said, that is a key part of it. I do think, okay, so I had this theory. I was just thinking about it the other day, and I love the book. I don't think Emily Bronte did a great job of considering race in the book. And I think
okay,
that is understandable for the time it's written.
yeah,
The fact that she lived very secluded
mm,
on the Yorkshire moors, would probably never have met people who weren't white. I think she kind of like, so the one of the theories I've read is that her brother sent her a postcard or a letter from Liverpool and had seen a lot of Irish migrants who were escaping the famine in Ireland, and he was talking about all the poverty and, as you said, the fact that there are people who had different skin colors
hmm,
in Liverpool that she would never have seen before, and that
yeah,
she took the idea from that, but that it's not part of the reason why we still argue about how black was Heathcliff is because
yeah,
she didn't really know herself.
yeah,
That's my theory. And the my generous reading of the film, which I don't think was probably what Emerald Fennell was thinking, but my generous reading, because I like the film, is that that isn't the main lens to view the novel through, and that it's about class and gender, and that she was trying to do that, and that maybe she didn't feel like she was best placed to make it about race. But I still would have preferred to have seen a not white actor.
yeah, me too. I think the class element is really interesting as well because, you know, that is a huge important part of the novel, and obviously Emerald Fennell's background
Yeah,
is totally different. You know, she's, you know, has grown up in quite high society, like she's grown up in, you know, very wealthy circles. I think she went to Oxford, like she, you know, she's had a very like grand upbringing, and I you know, I don't want to hate on that because that's just what she's been born into. But I did read a really great article that I feel will articulate this better than I could. So I'm going to read that out. So this is an article written by a recent guest of the pod, Rhiannon Lucy Coslet, and it's in The Guardian. I will link it in the show notes. And the article is called Wuthering Heights is at its heart a story of class and race. Emerald Fennell has got it all wrong. And what she said that really stayed with me in terms of class, I'm just going to say that this part that I've included is also exploring the race aspect of the book and the adaptation. When asked about the casting of a white actor, Fennell said, "You can only make the movie that you sort of imagined yourself when you read it. It felt telling to me that she couldn't imagine a dark-skinned actor, even though he's described as a gypsy and a lascar in the book. That Fennell at 14 was living a life of privilege cannot go unmentioned. I think it's part of why I left the cinema feeling so downcast. I'm tired of consuming art by people whose understanding of class struggle is limited to the paranoid notion that the rest of us are all plotting to topple them." Fennell showcased this worldview first in Saltburn and now with her version of Nelly Dean, whose machinations destroy Cathy and Heathcliff's love and whose cruel inaction causes Cathy's death. The director's nod in the film to Romeo and Juliet and how its tragic outcome is essentially caused by servants feels almost like a tacit acknowledgement of this idea. You just can't get the staff. The real takeaway from this film for me is about who gets to make art, whose voice matters, and what they choose to disregard in this creative climate. For all its attempts to be shocking, Fennell's film has stripped away all that is radical about Wuthering Heights, and even aesthetically, her attempt to outwit a Bronte falls flat. And it goes on, but yeah, I just found that
mm,
really interesting. And she's obviously got a very strong dislike of the film, which is fair. Like, it's fair. Everyone has different viewpoints. But I do think in terms of the class aspect, she has a really great point that, Emerald Fennell isn't somebody that can necessarily understand those, those parts of the novel and those parts of the film. And I think, it's really odd. It was really odd to me that like Kathy is RP in the film, like that's her accent. And I'm like, but would
They've
she?
never had a Yorkshire actor play Kathy before.
Oh, really?
She never has an accent.
I wonder why.
I
That's
think
so interesting.
I'm wrong about that. In the 2011 version, the younger Kathy, who they actually, so I'm quite interested as well in when they tend to need a younger actor and an older actor to play the roles of Kathy and Heathcliff. But in the 2011 version, they keep them young for a lot longer, which I think is interesting. So she's still the child actor when the engagement to Edgar happens, which is more like how it is in the novel, right? There's 3 years pass between the engagement and the marriage, and she's like 16 and then she's older, whereas in this version we get this like much older Kathy, who is an adult for most of the film. Anyway, I don't know what I'm saying with that, but the younger actor in the 2011 one, I think, was not from Yorkshire but from Sheffield, maybe.
Okay.
But it typically they have somebody who sounds like me playing Kathy.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm really intrigued by stuff like that. I'm also intrigued by the fact that it's two, like, I love Margot Robbie, I love Jacob Elordi. I think they're both phenomenal actors. But why have we got 2 Aussies playing?
Yeah.
That's just something that really has thrown me throughout this whole, the build up to this film. I've been like, why? Like, why have we got 2 Aussies? I know it's because, they want this film to be celebrated on a global stage, and they want everybody from around the world to go and see it, and it obviously does wonders in terms of marketing the film. But in terms of this story, I'm like, why? But I will say that I know some people thought his accent was terrible. I didn't think it was terrible.
I thought it was quite good.
I thought it was all right, and I'm Northern, and I just was confused by the fact that it's 2 Australians. I'm like,
it's definitely just her fantasy version. Like, if you think
it is
like, this is my favorite book, this is who I'd imagine playing it, I don't even imagine him being black. Like, it is that. But I think it can be enjoyed on that level. And there are other adaptations that don't do it like that. I think if you see it as this like fantasy version, and even the fact that it, like, so much of it kind of looks like a set, and I think what she does really, really well, so my favorite bit of it was one of the like montage scenes when Kathy first gets married to Edgar, and it's like her and Edgar and Isabella in the fancy house. And obviously that house is so ridiculous, not at all what it would have looked like. But I think what Emerald Fennell does maybe really well is captures how rich people, I think she captures that world. And I think we maybe are forgetting that she is showing privilege in a way that is interesting too. And I think she does that in Saltburn as well, right? We're in this big posh house, and she is able to see the ways in which that is toxic and just so fucking weird. Like, it's so weird, that house. We've got this like padded room which is meant to look like Kathy's skin. There's like
so
blood red floors.
Yes.
There's Isabella has her ribbon room. That place is mental, and in a way she's had to marry him because she needed to get out of the house that she was in, which was like a dangerous household to live in. And she that was her only option as a woman, was to try and marry as good as she could do. But that doesn't mean that the new place that she turns up in isn't mental too. And I think that's what I think Emerald Fennell did do quite a good job of showing, how limited the choices of the women are in that novel. Even like Isabella, they have no choices. The only choices they have are to marry someone and move to the other house.
Yes. I mean, like, the set design is incredible, and I think it's really interesting what you said there about how she showcases privilege within that montage. And we do go from this incredibly like dark, gloomy set of Wuthering Heights, and then we go to Cross Grange, is that how you say it? Like, that house is so like vibrant, like the colors are like insane, like the like you said, the blood red floors. There's also like a very Disney style, like in that montage there's a very Disney style scene when I think her and Isabella are outside in the snow, and Kathy's got this like bright red, like Red Riding Hood-esque cape on, and like it's all these like big colors, and like, even like I said before, those glasses, like everything just feels amped up when she moves into that house. And I think think, you know, somebody said about those glasses that, you know, she's got her rose tinted glasses on literally because we never see those glasses again in the film. You know, she's escaped this house and she thinks that all this house is going to be is just like, you know, wonderful sort of, I don't know, a wonderful, vibrant new lifestyle for her. And then actually, like, everything she'd been dealing with and struggling with before, you know, comes back to kind of haunt her. So I do think it's really cool what they did with the set.
I think she's empty in those scenes as well. She doesn't look that happy.
True.
She's like really glazed over and she's kind of pretending that it's all okay when it's not.
Yeah, that's fair. I know that they filmed some of it in studios in London, but then they did film the Yorkshire Moors scenes actually on the Yorkshire Moors. So I do love that because I did think they made that look so beautiful on film. And I almost don't care if they were like amping up the like foggy mistiness of it, because I just think it looked incredible on screen.
And
like it looked so beautiful.
In the past, they filmed that in like in America. I think in the first film they filmed a lot of that like more like near Hollywood, and they were just faking.
Oh, really?
So it is nice that they did that. Do you remember when that first like still came out of like Margot Robbie in the wedding dress, and everyone was just like, what is this?
Yes.
Yeah, I liked it more than I thought I would based on that still.
Yes.
Because I do think I think it gets you to that point where she's wearing that ridiculous wedding dress and she's going to the other house. If you just see that out of context, and maybe it's people who really hate the film who haven't seen the film, if you see that out of context, you're like, what are you
what is happening?
What is happening? But actually it is trying to show the whole point is it's meant to be ridiculous, and I think that's quite cool.
I think some of the costumes as well were beautiful. I read as well that, you know, the strange sort of cellophane-esque dress that she wears on the eve of her wedding, and she kind of goes into the bedroom. Somebody described it as like it was like a portrayal of like her husband literally unwrapping her like a gift to him. You know, it would have been that they lost their virginity on the night of their wedding during that time, so it was a literal thing of that. And I do think stuff like that's interesting. I want to mention Isabella.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought she was fantastic in the film. I thought Alison Williams was incredible.
Yes.
I think she stole every scene. I loved her talking about Romeo and Juliet.
Yes.
So bored that recounting the plot of Romeo and Juliet is like the most exciting thing in her life.
Yeah.
I think she was, I said her name wrong, didn't I? It's Alison Oliver.
Alison Oliver, yeah.
I thought she was sensational, and that she really this is very controversial because I read all the stuff where people think that it was degrading what they did with her character, but I actually think she's a character in the book who's just very like passive, and I think they gave her like a real storyline, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting trajectory, and I was listening to another podcast before. I basically consumed like everything I can on the discourse, and somebody highlighted the fact that she gives her consent like 4 times.
And he asks for it as well. He
4
doesn't
times.
He makes sure that she's okay with it, and it's so different to what's in the book. But I actually think that's really good.
Yeah.
But
I mean, she does escape in the book, doesn't she? She literally leaves him when she's pregnant and is like, see ya, not dealing with that, which would have been radical at the time. And I think it's interesting because in Emily Bronte's version, it's such a radical thing for, you know, a woman that would have been perceived as her husband's property to escape and break free, whereas I think now with Emerald Fennell's version, it is radical for a woman to say, well, actually, I'm happy with being treated this way. I choose to be treated that way. And I know that sounds like a really fucked up interpretation of it, but I think in terms of like sexuality and the way we perceive female sexuality, like she has, what's the word? Agency. She has agency. She's given her consent to be treated like that, and she wants it. And she, you know, she literally winks at Nelly while she's on her hands and knees with the dog collar around her neck.
Ideally, she should have been exposed to more in her life that meant that she could have chosen any number of different relationships. You know, she's not living today. She can't just like go on field and see what she's into. And what she wants is to not be stuck at this house that she's been stuck in forever. And I think she's a bit sick of like Kathy being the main character the whole time, because Kathy isn't like a brat, and I think she just gets to the point. I really like this new take on Isabella, because I thought it's like she, you know, that saying where she's like doing it for the plot. I think she just like wanted to be like, you know what, I'm gonna make this about me for a bit, and I love that.
Yeah, I love that. And you were right before, when she's so excited by the story of Romeo and Juliet because she's not got anything better to do.
No,
She's
she's got
got this
nothing going
little
on.
dollhouse, she's got a room full of ribbons.
Yeah,
Like, her
she's
life
making
is
that
so
doll
contained.
of Kathy with all the little bits of hair that she's got out of the, love that, or got out of the hairbrush.
Yeah.
She just
And
wants
the
to,
book, the book that she
yeah.
makes as
Oh, the
well.
vagina book.
The vagina book. It's so good. And
So
she says like,
horny.
"Oh, that's the mushroom that you looked at and you
Yeah,
liked, and I've kept it." And
yeah.
I mean, she's a really quirky character in this, and I didn't necessarily clock the quirkiness of a character when I was reading the book.
Mhm.
I did think she was an interesting character, but yeah, I didn't clock all of that, and I
Yeah,
thought
she's
this
a victim
was.
in the book, and in some ways you could say that she's a victim in this. But I do think that it's interesting in terms of the consent of. I think there's a scene where Heathcliff comes to her and like checks, and he's like, "I don't love you," and I think that it's all very. I think that that's. I thought that was just really quite radical, and that she is really
Yeah.
passive in the book, whereas I think that she's quite forgettable in the book, I guess.
Mm,
I think she's only in the book, she's just there to show how cruel Kathy can be. Because,
yeah.
that scene, which is in the book, where Kathy is like, Isabella really fancies you, Heathcliff, and it's really
Yeah,
cruel.
and she like pulls her hair. Yeah,
Yeah.
she does get really nasty with her. I do think the film shows the sort of toxic relationship between Cathy and Heathcliff, even though this has been sort of marketed as the greatest love story ever told. I'm like, this is the greatest love story ever told for the book talk girlies that all love dark romance.
Yeah.
And I think it's been marketed very much in that way. I did love Isabella. I did think Alison Oliver and Martin Clunes were both
Yeah.
standout
They were my
performances in
favorites.
this film. They were amazing. A couple of things to mention. I wondered what you thought about Cathy's death in the film, which is obviously so different from, not necessarily so different, but it is different from the novel. Obviously, in the novel, she dies during childbirth. The pregnancy thing is a big reveal. In the film, we learn of her pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
fairly early, and she says that the baby has died, and she essentially dies of, like, is it septicemia or something?
Yeah, I think it's
Sepsis?
a miscarriage, but then like the dead baby doesn't come out, and so obviously that's
Yes.
a huge infection risk.
Yeah.
I, I've got another little fan theory about this as well,
Okay.
actually,
Great.
which is
Let's hear it.
that obviously some people are really pissed off that Margot Robbie's way too old for the role, because
Yes.
I think in the book Kathy is like 16 when she gets engaged to Edgar. She waits a few years after Heathcliff has gone away, but she's still very young when they get married. Whereas, okay, so my reading of it is that she's a lot older, and by the time Edgar and Isabella arrive, when they sort of do it in a bit of a Pride and Prejudice way, and they're like, Thrushcross Grange, so hard to say, has been let at last, in a
Yes.
Pride and Prejudice way. So my reading of it is that she's like already in her late 20s by this point,
Yeah.
in the fantasy version of this film, and that she is desperate. She knows that her dad has got no money left. Heathcliff has no prospects. If she does not get married to someone who is of a higher class to her life is going to be miserable.
Yes.
And she's also reaching, like, at that time, the tail end of her eligibility as a wife, as somebody who is like, going to be fertile. And I think it's a bit of a comment on like infertility, because then they get
Mm.
married and you see them having sex, but she doesn't get pregnant for like a really long
Yeah.
time.
And her dad is
And
awful to her about it, isn't he?
yeah. So I think she's in that house, and not only is she like not really that happy, but then by the time Heathcliff comes back, they've been trying to like have a baby for years, which also would explain why the sex between her and Edgar looks very like there's no love involved, because
Yeah.
probably for so long they've just been thinking of it in terms of like we need to get an heir. And so obviously then when Heathcliff comes back, she's able to associate Heathcliff with like actual sexuality and like desire. And I think by that point she is actually pregnant, isn't she? So she
Yeah.
does get pregnant. Anyway, I just completely made all of this up that is not in the movie around it. I think it's plausible
Yeah.
that actually Emerald Fennell is trying to show an older Kathy, and that brings with it a different kind of like femininity. That
Yeah.
she, instead of being this like naive 16-year-old who doesn't know what she's doing. She's coming at it from like in late 20s, early 30s, where she feels like it's like her last shot at like having a baby maybe. And
Yeah.
you're more likely as well perhaps to have like a miscarriage if you're like older as well, and particularly if she's struggled to get pregnant up until then.
Yeah, I think it does bring a sort of modern conversation into a historical context. Like she, it's a much bigger part of the sort of cultural conversation. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it. That, we talk a lot more now about fertility and
Yeah,
infertility.
a miscarriage in the way that we would have
Yeah.
done before.
That's a
Yeah,
much more common thing to be spoken about now, whereas back then it probably wasn't. And it is a really cruel moment in the film where her dad says to her something like, all these years and no children or something like
yeah,
that. And you
yeah.
see how much that pains her. So I do think it is, interesting that she includes that and sort of takes that path with Kathy's story. I was slightly traumatized by the leeches.
Oh, the
And
leeches.
the blood was too intense for me. There was a lot, but the leeches. I mean, I know that's like the kind of thing they would have done back then. Is that they thought that would, I don't know,
Yeah,
get the illness out. But I was like, what is going
yeah,
on?
yeah, yeah. And that they're all on the walls, because the wall they think it's skin.
Yes, yeah. So good. I think we are running out of time, but I would love us to go through favourite moments in the
Okay.
film, because I feel like we have listed off the stuff that we've got sort of grievances with. We have named some things that we enjoyed, but I think if you want to list off some of your
Yeah,
favourite moments, that would be
I enjoyed
great.
the eggs. I think the
The
eggs were
eggs.
funny.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody in the cinema understood what was going to happen before the eggs were discovered the second time. When
Yeah.
he uses it to announce that he's back,
Yes.
and it just felt like everyone there was like the eggs just before it
Yes.
happened, and I thought that was really nice.
Very good. Yes, that was really funny. I do think there was a lot of humour in the
Yeah, me
film.
too.
Yeah.
I just cannot quite understand people saying that they were really bored. I just don't think
Yeah.
it was boring at
No,
all.
not at all. Not at all. No. There was a lot of like laugh out loud moments. I do think Isabella was hilarious.
Yeah, her doing Romeo and Juliet, I was just like, oh, this is brilliant.
Amazing.
Because we all know, and that their whole house, like, it made me think about, I don't know whether you know this, like people, like couples, when a couples buy, like our age, they'll like buy a house and they're doing a reno, and every single part of that reno, the woman has kind of decided and is making all the decisions, but then their
Yes.
like husband or their partner will get to have like one room where they've got like a plasma screen TV, and
Yeah.
they've got their little things, they've got their like war hammers on the side or whatever. And I think the house is quite like that. That I found it funny that Edgar is kind of emasculated because he's living in this very like girly house.
Yes. Yeah.
I
No, for
really like
sure.
that.
I do
I think
think,
that was commenting on like something quite modern day
yeah,
in a way that was interesting.
definitely. I think the first introduction to Isabella and like their house and Kathy looking over the fence and then him
Yeah,
opening the gate and her just being, I thought all of that was so silly and fun. I
yeah.
really, really enjoyed that. Um,
Yeah, and her waiting for, she thought they were going to come to her, and she's like
yes.
sat there waiting. I thought that was really good as well, that
Yeah.
she was just like, it's fine, they're going to come to me. And that she was even talking to Heathcliff about it. And I thought that was like, yeah, I thought there was something really funny about her like pick me energy, and how she was so sure that they were going to come looking for her because she was so gorgeous and beautiful. And in the end, she had to go and be desperate about it.
Yes, 100%. I'd mentioned before about how I feel like this film has definitely been marketed to the BookTok girlies, and there are a couple of moments that I have in mind that I actually really enjoyed. Her dress with the lace bodice, he picks her up one-handed with
Yeah,
that, very
yeah,
sexy,
yeah, love that.
I'm already seeing videos of girls trying to get their boyfriends to do it. I love that. There's the moment where she is first, I think it's the first time that she sees sex or gains an understanding of sex, is when is it Joseph
Yeah,
is having sex with the horse thing with a woman, and they've got the mask sort of thing. It's a bit of a BDSM
yeah, yeah,
element
yeah,
there. She's watching that through the attic, and Heathcliff puts his hand over her
yeah.
eyes and over her mouth.
Yeah.
Very hot.
And I
Love
really
that.
liked as well that in that moment and at other moments in the film, I was always expecting it to become really like horrific. Like I thought
Yeah.
that was going to be like a rape scene, or I
Fair.
thought
Okay.
that like Heathcliff was suddenly going to become like dreadful later on. And I actually really liked that it would like sort of hint at that and make you be like, oh, this is going to get really dark. When actually people were just like, it was like consensual sex like every time. And I thought that that was really like nice and unexpected.
Yeah, I do think it is an empowering thing that she has done, is that, female desire and pleasure is very, very much feels at the forefront, which does feel like a radical thing given the historical context that that wouldn't have been the case. But in this film, it was that these women were allowed to have agency where sex is concerned. And yeah, you're right. I think when the guy like chases her into the barn, you do think, oh God, like what's going to happen? But then you see like how much she's enjoying it and getting pleasure out of it, and she does give her consent for it. So yeah, I think all of that is great. I do think it was very sexy. Somebody said that the sex scenes were boring. I was like,
No,
sorry.
I don't understand that either. Like, what do you want? What do they
I
want?
thought they were great.
Yeah, I thought it was good too. And I also just think that I think there is room for that in a Wuthering Heights adaptation.
Yeah.
Because, as I said earlier, because like Nelly is narrating this story and she is stuck indoors in the kitchen and she's not allowed
Yes.
to live her own life. They probably were out there fucking. Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
Like, why wouldn't they?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like we don't know. It's a big reveal in the book that she's pregnant, so we have no idea that what she's doing. So yeah, I do think I'm glad that they included the sex, and we are left waiting in the film. We aren't just given it. Like we are like, oh, is this going to happen? Like when he first covers her eyes and her mouth in that scene where she's first seeing, sex, we aren't just giving it straight away. Like you wonder in that moment, oh, are they then going to do this? But then she runs away. So I do like that. I love that they've included original dialogue. I think one of the biggest quotes is obviously whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Really important that they left that in because I think it's such a beautiful piece of dialogue from Wuthering Heights. And also, have I written another one down? It's on my notes app. I have not broken your heart, you have broken it, and in breaking it, you've broken mine. I think that's such a beautiful line, and I'm glad that that was included in the film.
And that is the crux of the book as well. Like the thing I was struck with the most reading it in the summer was that Kathy just like thinks it's all going to be okay, even though it's such a mad idea. So like I think there's a line where she says, I've got my book here, but I'm not gonna be able to find it. She's basically like, if I marry Edgar, I can still be friends with Heathcliff and he'll be fine, and like we'll still see each other. And she's so sure that it's all going to be okay. And then she eats another line where she's like, I'm an angel. She thinks that she's like sorting out the whole world and that it's all going to be great.
Yes.
And it's only later that you can see how much damage that does, because she's like playing them like pawns and not actually, and that you can't do that,
Yeah, I think
really
that moment, I wrote down that quote as well. When she says, if Heathcliff and I married, we should be beggars. But then she says, if I marry Linton, I can aid Heathcliff to rise and place him out of my brother's power. So it feels like she's doing this out of love.
Yeah, she thinks that she's protecting him, and she thinks, and I can see why she's like, I just feel like she's doing that very like feminine thing that I really love that like women do. When you get an idea and you're like, bah, 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 and it will all sort out, and if I do this and if I can just do this, everything will be fine. And that's what she's trying to do, and it's very relatable.
Yes, 100%. I think overall thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know why everyone's hating on it so much. I think we
have come to the conclusion that this is very much a fan fiction style adaptation.
Oh yeah, it's a fan fiction style adaptation,
and they've lent heavily into a love affair.
Yeah, says a lot about Emerald Fennell as a teenager.
But it also says a lot about where we are as a society and culturally, and the things that sells. And that does sell this very gothic, tragic, generational abuse story. The romance aspect is really appealing. And I do think we need some of that right now.
Yeah.
Some of the romance aspect, not some of the other stuff, Jesus.
Maybe we're just really basic, but...
Maybe we are.
Fun.
Yeah. I don't think the abuse was entirely hidden, though. There's that awful scene with where Nelly takes Kathy into the separate room whilst Heathcliff is being beaten. So it's not
Yeah.
like she's completely glazed over all the bad
No,
elements that.
I don't think it was vapid. It really made me like think quite deeply about a lot of things. And maybe that's just because I was going to come on this podcast and I was like, oh, I'm going to have something to say if I'm going to come on saying that I liked it. But I just really think it was quite good in lots of ways.
Yeah, it is a very entertaining film. But yeah, I'm so glad that we've talked about this. I feel
Yeah,
like this is genuinely something that you could talk about for hours because there's so much to unpick. And we're
I
probably going to
know.
come off this call and be like, why didn't we mention that? But I absolutely loved this so much,
Oh no, I'm
Catherine.
so glad that we were like on the same page about a lot of it and that I wasn't having to convince you. I'm glad you didn't hate it basically. And
No,
it's
I didn't.
fun talking to you about it. And I'm really glad you enjoyed the novel as well and that it got you to read the novel.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, we have to plug you and your work.
Oh.
So tell the listeners about your novel Confessions. You have been on before, but I think for anybody that hasn't listened to that episode, please tell them what Confessions is all about.
My novel Confessions is a multi-generational saga set between New York and Ireland, and it opens on the day of 9/11. And there's a lot of secrets that are uncovered. I guess you know what I'm going to say. It's quite like Wuthering Heights. You've got three
Yeah,
generations. Instead of it being the two different houses, you've got New York, you've got rural Ireland. There you go. It basically is Wuthering
love
Heights.
that.
A lot of trauma.
There is a lot of drama, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's out in paperback next month, and I don't know what date it is on, but if anyone wants to come and see me in London, I'm going to be at Hampstead Waterstones, I think on like the second week of March, like mid-March. I'm
Amazing.
doing an event, and I'm sure if you Google it, it will come up.
I'll pop a
Um,
link in the show notes if people want to get
yeah,
themselves a ticket.
yeah,
And also, they can pre-order the paperback, can't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
Yes,
Pre-order the
amazing.
paperback out soon. It's got the cover. The cover is really cool, and it's like a slight change to the hardback version. Yeah, it's good. It looks great.
Excited to see that. Yeah, everyone go buy yourselves a copy of Confessions if you haven't already read it. I absolutely loved that book, and I think you will all love it too. And I do think Wuthering Heights is a decent comparison for it,
Thank
to be
you.
fair.
I had
Yeah.
not thought about that in advance at all, and then suddenly I was like, it all makes sense, and now I'm
Oh,
going to
it
use
does.
that whenever I have to talk about
Love that. Bring it up now.
it.
Thank you so much for joining me, Kath.
Thanks,
Can
Hannah.
I call you Kathy?
Ah, yeah, I think I should just rebrand as Kathy and
Do it.
lean into it.
Now's
Yeah.
your time. Thank you so much. And listeners, I'll be popping a link in the show notes to where you can follow Catherine, to where you can buy her book. And please do come and let us know what your thoughts were on the Wuthering Heights adaptation. I can never hear about this film enough. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. That is all we've got time for. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Kathy. And
Thanks,
goodbye.
Hannah. Bye.